Hi there. So moving forward, factoring is super important. In fact, it's pretty much vital. So I thought what I've done here is just put together an overall review of factoring for you, just to make sure that you're tracking with factoring in general. All right. So I started you here at the top, factoring polynomials. Method number one is GCF. I did find a typo for myself. The GCF, that pulling out your greatest common factor. And so I've written here for you the 4 steps to do that. You find the GCF and you pull that GCF outside the parentheses. So let's go ahead down here as we kind of work through these steps. We'll look at the problem. They tell us to factor out the GCF. And when you're factoring out the GCF, you're taking out the highest number that each term has in common and the least letter that each term has in common. Okay, so for example, in letter A here, I'm thinking of the highest number that will divide evenly into 8 and 12. And let's say, for example, you chose a 2. Okay, so let's say you chose a 2. And then as far as x's goes, your letters go, this has 1 x, that has 0 x's. You take the least, so I'm taking no x's, all right? Then you write a parenthesis, and now, essentially, now you're asking yourself, 2 times what gives you 8x? So 2 times what gives you 8? That would be 4. Then you got to have an x there. Minus 2 times what gives you 12? That would be a 6. Here's how I know I didn't go far enough, okay? Look inside the parentheses here. 4 and 6, do they still have a number in common? Hopefully you agree. They sure do, right? 2 would still go into both of these numbers. So what that means is I didn't pull out the highest number in the very beginning, okay? So always be on the lookout for that. Whenever you get to your, what do you think your final answer is, ask yourself here in the parentheses, if they still have something in common, then you haven't really pulled out the full GCF, okay? All right, so let's go back now. GCF, what's the highest number that'll go into both 8 and 12? Hopefully you agree. That would be 4. So then we say, okay, 4 times what gives us 8? That'd be 2x minus 4 times what gives us 12? And that would be 3. Now when we look at our parenthesis part here, 2 and 3, the only thing they have left in common is a 1, and that would, you can't pull out you wouldn't want to pull out a 1, okay? So that would be our final answer here, 4 parentheses 2x minus 3. You can check yourself by distributing that 4 through this parenthesis and make sure you get this back, and sure enough, we would. Step number 3 just says is that if you have 2 terms, if you start out with 2 terms, then inside the parentheses you should have 2 terms. If you start out with 5 terms, then inside the parentheses here you should have 5 terms, okay? All right, let's do one more here together. So if we look over at letter B, let's pick up the highest number and least letters that all 3 of these terms have in common. So we're looking for a number that 6, 12, and 18 all have in common. The highest number that will go into each of those numbers evenly. And hopefully you agree, 6 will go into all of those. Now let's look at our letters. We're pulling out the least letters that they have in common. So this first term has 4 A's. This one has 2 A's. That one has 1 A. So I pull out the least so I can pull out 1 A. Now look at my B's. I've got 1 B, 2 B's, no B's, so I can't pull out any B's. I pull out the least. So now, write what I have left over. 6 times what gives me 6? That'd be a 1. You have 1 A on the outside. You need 4, so you're going to put an A cubed, and then you're going to have to put in your B. That 1 there, you don't have to have that. You could just write A cubed B minus 6 times what gives us 12? That'd be 2. You've got 1A, but you need 2, so put another A, B squared, plus 6 times what gives you 18? That'd be 3, and you already have your A on the outside, so you're good to go. Again, you can take this 6A and distribute to all 3 terms, and you should get what you originally started with, okay? I'll let you try C. All right, let's move on down to the next piece. We are looking here at factoring trinomials. We're looking at specifically just factoring trinomials with a leading coefficient of 1, meaning that it's in descending order, so that means you've got x squared, then B and C here are just numbers, so x squared, then x, then number, and we're saying that the number in front of x squared is a positive 1. The steps for factoring trinomials when your leading coefficient is 1, always ask yourself, is it in descending order? If it is, go on to the next step. If it's not, put it in descending order, okay? So when I say descending order, it's kind of like example A down here. I've got x squared, then I've got x, then I've got a number. So 2, 1, 0 x's. That's what I mean by in descending order. Then the next question you always ask it is, does it have a common factor? If it does, pull it out. If it doesn't, go to the next step, All right, so looking here at letter A, we've already established it's in descending order. Then we ask, does it have a common factor? Is there a number that will go into 1, 8, and 15? And the only number that would be a 1. You also look at letters, but you can see here that you've got 2 x's, 1 x, no x's, so you can't pull out any x's. So we don't have a common factor either. Next step then is a method referred to as guess and check. For those of you going on to calculus, this is the method that I would highly recommend getting under your belt. You need to be able to be fluent, proficient, and for lack of a better word, just really to be quicker at factoring, okay, whenever moving on to calculus. So guess and check, if the more you do it, the quicker you're going to get with that. So I'm going to model that here with these examples. I'm actually going to do all 4 of these examples. So the way that you do guess and check is that we just now start with our 2 parentheses. What goes in the first spots are, you ask yourself, what's the only way that you can multiply to get x squared? Well, that'd be x times x, right? That's the only way that you can multiply to get x squared, x times x. Then what goes in these last spots, here and here, you ask yourself, what's the most common way, or sometimes it's the most common, but sometimes essentially you're asking yourself, how do you multiply to get 15 that when you add or subtract it will give you 8? So I'm just going to come over here and sort of brainstorm for you. Think about the only ways to multiply to give you 15. There's 1 times 15 and 3 times 5. Those are the only ways that would multiply to give you 15. Now, of those pairs, is there a pair there that when you add or subtract, you could get 8? Hopefully you agree. Yeah, I could get 8 out of 3 and 5. So sure enough, I'll just put it like that. If you swap 3 and 5, it wouldn't matter. Now, here, the last step is to determine your signs. So you check your outside and your inside. So on the outside for me, I'm getting 5x. On the inside, I'm getting 3x. My goal is a positive 8x, so the only way I'm going to get that positive 8x is to make them both positive. Okay? You can check, and then a final check for yourself is to make sure that positive 3 times positive 5, sure enough, is positive 15. The way to check yourself to make sure that x plus 3 times x plus 5 is the correct solution, FOIL it, right? If you start to FOIL this, x times x gives you x squared, outside 5x, inside 3x. So 5x plus 3x, yep, that's going to give me 8. And then last, 3 times 5 will give me 15. So this would be our final answer here. It would be perfectly acceptable that if you wrote this, x plus 5 times x plus 3. That's legal. Okay, either one. All right, let's move over to letter B. It's in descending order. Does it have a common factor? Is there a number that will go into 2, 10, and 8? Hopefully you agree. 2 will go into all of those. Let's pull out that 2. Write what I have left over. X squared minus 2 times what gives me 10. 5x plus 2 times what gives me 8. 4. So essentially here we pulled out our GCF first. Now we're going to go to our guess and check. So again, the only way to multiply to give you x squared, x and x. Now to go in the back spots, we're thinking about ways to multiply to give you 4. Come over here and brainstorm again. Only 2 ways to multiply to give you 4, right? You have 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. But think about it, you need to get a 5, a negative 5 to be exact, in the center. So the only way you're going to be able to get that negative 5 in the center is to use 1 and 4, because you've got to add and subtract. So I'm going to put a 1 and a 4. Check your outside and your inside. So on the outside, I'm getting 4x. On the inside, I'm getting 1x. My goal is to get a negative 5x. So think about, now we've got to figure out our signs. So if you made them both positive, you'd have a positive 5x. If you made like the 1 negative, then you have 4 minus 1. Well, that's going to give me 3. How can I still need to get 5. So both positive gives me positive 5. Hopefully you agree both negative would give me negative 5. So put minus, minus. And that would be your final answer. Likewise, on this one, you could have, so your final answer here is 2 parentheses x minus 1 times x minus 4. And you can swap those two. You can have x minus 4, then x minus 1. Same difference. Okay? All right, let's go on down to letter C. Letter C, hopefully you recognize this is not in descending order. So the first thing I need to do is write it in descending order. So x squared, then my x term, so minus 5x, then my number, minus 24. Take the signs that are in front. So x squared is positive, 5x is negative, 24 is negative. Now you're ready to guess and check, because we don't have a common factor. Only way to multiply to give you x squared, x times x. Now think about ways to multiply, give you 24. You've got 1 times 24. Got a little bit more options here, right? 2 times 12. You want to stop whenever you try to get 5. 3 times 8. I'll go one more time. 4 times 6. Okay. Think about adding or subtracting these pairs to where you could get a negative 5. And hopefully you agree, oh, 3 and 8, that could give me a 5. So let's go with 3 and 8. Outside for me, I'm getting 8x. Inside, I'm getting 3x. My goal is a negative 5x, so the only way I'm going to get that negative 5, make the 8 negative. So that's the way you're going to get negative 5, and that tells you that your 8x needs to be the term that's negative. You put that minus sign in front of where you're getting 8. So this is where, on the outside here, this is where I'm getting 8x, so I'm going to put the minus sign in front of that, plus sign there. So final answer there, x plus 3 times x minus 8, or I'll say this one more time, you can swap them, x minus 8 times x plus 3. Either one of those is acceptable. All right, and then lastly here in letter D, it might not look like it's in descending order, but it actually is in descending order according to your A's, because you think about it here, I've got 2 A's, 1 A, no A's, okay? So you ask yourself, do you have a common factor? Well, this one's got an A and that one's got an A, but that one doesn't, okay? So we don't have a common factor either. So we're ready then to go to our guess and check. The only way to multiply to give you A squared, A times A. Think about ways to multiply to give you 36 that when you add or subtract would give you 13. So think about ways to multiply to give you 36. 1 times 36, 2 times 18, 3 times 12, 4 times 9. I just try to go in order, okay? Oh, 4 and 9. Yep, that could give me 13. So I'm going to have 4 and 9, but notice since this is b squared, I'm going to have to do a 4b and a 9b so that I have, when I multiply those two pieces there, I'm going to get 36b squared like I need. So now we'll do our outside and our inside. So on the outside I have 9ab. On the inside I have 4ab. My goal is a negative 13ab. Only way I'm going to get the negative there is to make them both negative. So minus, minus. Okay. Let's flip it on over. The ones that we just got finished doing, we would refer to as our easier, quote unquote, easier factoring, because that leading coefficient is 1. However, not all trinomials have a leading coefficient of 1, and whenever they don't have a leading coefficient of 1, then you've got also a number in front of your x squared term. You essentially still approach it the same way. You're going to you still need to put your trinomial in descending order. Ask yourself if it has a common factor. If it does, pull it out. If it doesn't, move on. I'm still going to do guess and check here with this next example, and then I'm going to show you another method for factoring if you are not comfortable with the guess and check. So what that says here then is they want us to factor. I figure it'd be easier for me to talk you through it as opposed to just reading through these directions here. So they want us to factor this trinomial. So you have 3x squared plus 7x minus 20. What goes in the first spot is the only way to multiply to give you 3x squared. So think about it. The only way you can multiply to get 3x squared would be 3x times x. That's the only way. Okay. Now we've got options with 20. Typically what I tell people is think of the most common way to multiply to give you 20. I mean, you know, 1 times 20 of course gives you 20, but you don't often see that whenever you are working in mathematics. 10 times 2 also gives you 20. But the most common way generally is the ones where the numbers are a little closer together. So like for example here, 4 times 5 would give me 20, okay? I'm gonna put the 4 in the front and the 5 in the back just so you can see a little bit of the thought process here. You're still asking yourself outside and inside. So on the outside here, 3x times 5, I have 15x. On the inside, 4 times x is 4x. Now my goal this time is 7x. Is there any way with 15 and 4 I'm going to be able to get 7 when you add or subtract it, right? 15 plus 4 is 19, and 15 minus 4 is 11. So that's not going to work. But don't just scrap 5 and 4. Swap 5 and 4. So now let's put 5 in the front and 4 in the back. And if we do that, now on the outside, 3x times 4, that's 12x. Inside, 5 times x I get 5x. All right, my goal here is to get a positive 7x. I'm just going to scratch that out now. I can get, out of 12 and 5, I can get a positive 7. Since I want a positive 7, think about which number needs to be negative. Hopefully you agree that 5 would be negative, right? Because 12 minus 5 would give us a positive 7. So if the 5 needs to be negative, remember that sign goes in front of where you're getting the 5, right here in the center. This is where I'm getting my 5, so the minus goes in front of that. My 12 needs to be positive. This is where I'm getting my 12, so plus there, because the sign goes in front of where you get it. And that would be your final answer. And a last double check for yourself, negative 5 times positive 4 is the last term, negative 20. Okay? Again, you can still FOIL these to make sure that you have the same answer. All right, let's move on over here to letter B. In letter B, it's in descending order. Does it have a common factor? Is there a number that will go into all three of those? And hopefully you would agree here. Yeah, 4 will actually go into all of those. And maybe if you were thinking 2, if you had done 2, you would have found that all three of those numbers left in your parentheses still had something in common, so you would have to have gone higher. So we've gone up to our 4. 4 times what gives us 8? 2x squared minus x. You can think of that as a 1x. If that helps you, I'm going to go ahead and put that 1 there. Minus 4 times what gives you 15? And what gives us 60? That would be 15. Got ahead of myself. All right, so now I'm ready to do my guess and check. In the front spot, the only way to multiply to give me 2x squared, 2x times x. In the back spot, most common way to multiply to give you 15, 5 times 3. So I'm going to put 5 in the front, 3 in the back. So now let's do my outside and my inside. On the outside I have 6x. On the inside I have 5x. My goal this time is a negative 1x. I can get that with 6 and 5. Since you want it to be a negative 1, which number needs to be negative between 6 and 5? 6 would have to be negative, right? Negative 6 plus 5 would give you negative 1. So then, okay, now that tells me then wherever I'm getting negative 6, in front of that needs to be the negative. So 2x times 3, that's giving me my 6. Negative goes in front of that. 5 needs to be positive. This is where I'm getting my 5, plus sign there. Final answer. Okay. All right, let's do one more. Descending order, no common factor. So you're ready, guess and check. Again, pause the video if you'd like to try this one on your own, okay? Only way to multiply to give you 5x squared? 5x times x. Think about ways to multiply to give you 6. Okay, so we've got 2 times 3 and 1 times 6, right? Those are the only ways. Let's say, the most common way to multiply to give you 6 is 2 times 3. So let's do that. Let's do 2 times 3. This sort of gives you a little bit of the idea of guess and check. I used to tell my folks whenever we were doing guess and check to bring an eraser, because you'll end up erasing a lot. But as you do more factoring, you will get quicker at it, okay? It's almost like a puzzle, okay? So anyway, on the outside, 5 times 3, that'll give us 15x. Inside 2 times x, that's going to give me 2x. Well, there's no way out of 15 and 2 I'm going to be able to get negative 31, so that won't work. Swap it. So don't just scrap it, swap it. So put 2 there. Wait a minute, I think that's where I had it, wasn't it? So 3 here and 2 here. So outside now I've got 10x. Inside I've got 3x. Well, there's no way out of 10 and 3 I'm going to be able to get 31 either. So scrap the 2 and the 3. That's definitely no good. Let's go with 6 and 1. Think about it. You're trying to get 31. If I put 6 in the back, I'm at least, when I multiply that, that's going to give me 30x. Okay, that starts to become more of your thought process. Oh, if I put 6 back there, that's going to give me 30. And then I've got my 1 here. So on the outside, I have 30x. On the inside, I have 1x. My goal is a negative 31x. The only way to get that negative 31, got to make them both negative. And then, check your last. Negative 1 times negative 6, sure enough, gives you positive 6. Okay. Now, if the guess and check, everybody really should be able to do guess and check if your leading coefficient is a 1. Okay, you really should be able to do guess and check with your leading coefficient being a 1. If you find yourself still struggling though to do guess and check when your leading coefficient is not a 1, like we had here in example 3, then I'm going to show you another method. It's referred to as the bottoms up method. Okay. So You're still doing the same. You still do the first couple of steps are the same. You still have to write it in descending order. You still ask yourself, does it have a common factor? But then we deviate from there. So instead of me um, reading this to you, let me show you. Okay, so come down here to example 4. Example 4, A, B, and C are actually the exact same problems that I just worked for you. I'm going to do A and B with you. Okay, so in letter A, it's in descending order. Didn't have a common factor before, so it still doesn't. So the next step, it says in number 3 here, it says slide A to C and multiply. So remember, this is your A, this is your B, and this is your C. It says slide A to C and multiply. And when you slide that A to that C, then now your leading term is x squared. Keep the middle term, but now 3 times 20 is 60, right? Then you factor that trinomial with guess and check as if it had a leading coefficient of 1. It does have a leading coefficient of 1. So now we'll go back to our guess and check. The only way to multiply to give you x squared, x and x. Now we got to think about ways to multiply to give us 60, that when we add or subtract we could get 7. So you kind of brainstorm. Okay, I've got 1 times 60, 2 times 30, still not getting a 7 there. So 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12. Ah, there we go. 5 and 12, right? 5 and 12 would give me a 7. So I'm going to put a 5 and a 12. And now think about it. You want a positive 7 in the center. So you think about your outside is 12x. Your inside is 5x. Since you want a positive 7x, then which one do we need to make negative? That would have to be that 5. So then you make the 5 negative and your 12 positive. Now your next step, all right, so now you've got it factored there. Your next step, we can't ignore the fact that we did that slide, okay, so we've got to take care of that slide. Divide the constant in both of these binomials, so each of these terms here, divide the constant by the original value that you slid, okay? So if you remember in the very beginning, we slid a 3, so I'm going to take this term and divide by 3, and that term and divide by 3, okay? So then that brings me to this step. I have x minus 5/3, x plus, well, 12 divided by 3, that cleans up nicely, gives me a 4. And now one last step, it says move any remaining denominators of your constants of the constants to the coefficient of x. So I do have a denominator here. It becomes a coefficient in front of x to give me a final answer of 3x minus 5 times x plus 4. And if we go back up and look at letter A there, sure enough, 3x minus 5 times x plus 4. That's what we found before, okay? So this is referred to again as the bottoms-up method. All right, so we'll do another one together. So here in letter B, write it in descending order, so it's definitely in descending order. Does it have a common factor? Sure enough, it does have a common factor of 4, so let's pull that 4 out. Write what we have left over. 2x squared minus x minus, what, 15? Slide A to C. So now I have 4 parentheses, x squared minus x minus 2 times 15, 30. All right, now you're ready to guess and check. Only way to multiply to give you x squared, x times x. Most common way to give you 30, 5 times 6. We need a negative 1 in the center, so between 6x and 5x, you want a negative 1x. Only way you're going to be able to get a negative 1 is if your 6 is negative, and then positive 5 times negative 6 gives you negative 30. Most common thing folks forget to do is this next step. You might think, oh, I've got it factored, but if you were to FOIL this out, you're not going to get your original. Don't forget you slid. So because you slid, now you have to take all of these constant terms and divide by what you slid. So I divided by 2. I slid a 2, so I have got to, we slid a 2. So now I've got to divide by 2. Whatever you slide, that's what I used to say. Whatever you slide, you must divide. So 4 parentheses, x plus 5 over 2, and then x minus 3. Any denominators, come up as coefficients in front. So final answer here, 4 parentheses 2x plus 5 times x minus 3. Again, it's the same problem that we did a minute ago. We just use guess and check. This is a methodical way to get there. Guess and check is a little bit more on you, but you can see you get the same answer, 4 parentheses 2x plus 5 times x minus 3. It's the same answer we just got here. All right. I encourage you to stop the video and try letter C there. Or if you already are good with guess and check, then just continue with guess and check. I still want to present the bottoms up method just because if you can't get guess and check, you've got to be able to factor. So I'm trying to show you a way that will work. Okay. All right, so sometimes just below that, sometimes not all polynomials can be factored. If a polynomial cannot be factored, it's referred to as being prime. So down here in example 5, we say factor the trinomial as normal. A lot of times whenever I show, once I tell people, oh, well, if you can't factor it, it's prime. Well, be careful, because don't just give up on a problem and say, oh, it's prime. Be sure that you do your due diligence to the problem, okay? So let's look at this first one here in letter A. It's a leading coefficient here of 1, so the only way to multiply to give you x squared, x times x. Now think about the last term. The only way to multiply to give you 1 is 1 and 1. That's the only way. So now think about your outside and inside. Outside's 1x, inside's 1x. Your goal is a positive 7x. Is there any way with 2 1s you're going to be able to get a 7? I hopefully agree. There's definitely not. And there's no other possibilities. There's no other ways to multiply to give you 1. This would be an example of something that is prime. Okay. I'll let you try letter B. All right, let's flip it on over then. And then I'm just going to wrap it up here with differences of squares. Okay, a difference of squares occurs whenever you have a term being squared subtracting another term being squared. So difference means you have to have a subtraction. To recognize whether something is a difference of squares or not, make sure that you can do all 3 of these things. Make sure that you can take a square root of the first term and the last term. Okay, so the square root of a squared, oh sure, that's a. Square root of b squared, that's b. And that the 2 terms are separated by a subtraction sign. So sure enough there, this is a subtraction sign. So then what happens in terms of difference of squares, the square root of a squared is a and a, square root of b squared is b and b, and the signs on a difference of squares is always a plus and a minus. Doesn't matter which order you put it in, okay? Steps to factoring a difference of squares, you still ask yourself, does it have a common factor? Because if it does, you got to pull it out. Then you ask yourself those same questions. Can you take the square root of the first and the last terms, and is there a subtraction sign in between? If it doesn't satisfy those, then you're not going to be a difference of squares, okay? And a difference of squares is always for two-term polynomials. It has to have 2 terms. If it has 3 terms, then you can't be even thinking about a difference of squares. You'll construct 2 sets of parentheses. And the square root of the first term is going to go in the first spot. The square root of the second term will go in the second spot. And one parenthesis will have a plus in it. The other will have a minus in it. Let's do example 6 together. So you ask yourself here, okay, p squared. Can I take the square root of p squared? Sure enough. Can I take the square root of 81? Yep. And is there a minus sign? Yes. So this is a difference of squares. The square root of p squared, p and p. Square root of 81, 9 and 9, plus and a minus. Final answer. You can FOIL this and check yourself. P times p, p squared. Outside, minus 9p. Inside, plus 9p. Last, positive 9 times negative 9, negative 81. Look what happens to those 9p's. P squared minus 81. So sure enough, this is your final answer. Just showing you here, down here, how to check yourself. All right, letter B. Can you take the square root of the first term? Yes, you can. Can you take the square root of the next term? Oh, I should have asked, if we had a common factor. And there's not a common factor. So since there's not a common factor, I went immediately into my square roots. I can take the square root of 9x squared. That'd be 3x. I can take the square root of 16. That'd be 4. Do I have a minus sign? I do not. You're not going to be able to factor this. This is prime. Okay? It has to satisfy all 3 conditions. All right, letter C. Does it have a common factor? Is there a number that will go into both 4 and 16? And hopefully you agree. There would be a 4. Can you pull out any letters? Unfortunately not. This one has an x, that one has a y. They don't both have x's or both have y's, so you can only put out 4. But, so write what you have left over. X squared minus 4y squared. So now, from here, ask yourself, is this a difference of squares? Can you take it further? If you couldn't, don't write prime. Just say, okay, well, all you could do was take out the GCF. Okay, so that you would still, you wouldn't say prime there. I'd say, okay, this was all I could do. But let's see if we can go further since it's a 2-term. Can I take the square root of x squared? Yep. Can I take the square root of 4y squared? Yes. It's got a minus sign in between. I can go further. 2 parentheses. Square root of x squared, x and x. Square root of 4y squared, 2y and 2y. One's plus, one's minus. Final answer. Okay? All right, example 7 is really, it's all mixed up, giving you the opportunity to try more with factoring. Factoring is vital as we move forward in Math 171, so just be sure you give this a shot, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks a lot. Bye.